Come on. Come on. You got it. There we go. We are doing Purgatory today. Big one. Big one. Let me get the Discord open. If you're watching this later, we have a Discord. There's a link to the Discord in the live chat pinned to the top. There's a link to the Discord in the description of the video. We do a number of these live streams every week across 2 different YouTube channels. So one of them every Tuesday is on this channel at Tattoo Theist. This is a topic discussion. So usually we all vote upon a topic in the Discord. Whatever wins the vote is what we talk about. So recently we've done things like reincarnation. We're doing Purgatory tonight. We did mental health amongst Christians, the historicity of the Gospels, Marcion in the First New Testament, and Gnosticism, things like that. That's all on this YouTube channel. In Discord on the events page, you can see the next one we're doing is Thursday. That is the Book of Giants. So this is apocryphal texts. That's on a different YouTube channel at Live Bible Study. This is all in Discord, so it's easy to keep track of. Saturday, we are doing the Gospel of Thomas right now. And then I think after that, we're going to do the Gospel of Judas. So these are non-canonical texts. And then every Sunday, to keep it classic, we do something out of the canon. So we're reading the Bible chronologically from cover to cover. So we're reading the book of Job right now. All of that's on Discord. Easy to find. But subscribe to at Live Bible Study because that's where 3 of these happen every week. Everything is also being automatically copied over to Rumble just as a backup because we've had some issues in the past and I was doing it for a long time and I stopped and now I am doing it again just in case. YouTube has historically had problems with me for whatever reason. But that's the deal. So we're going to hang out for a little bit because today's schedule was off and odd. So we're at a weird time today. But Purgatory is the topic, and I'm very excited. It's good stuff. I tried to take a very specific route with it, and I know other people have definitely different opinions than me, so it should be interesting to see where that goes. Should be interesting. While we wait, I thought it would be fun, as it usually is, to pull up, here it is. What is Purgatory? From Catholic Answers. So we have, throughout history, often defaulted to gotquestions.org. Looks like everybody is in Purgatory tonight. The time change always ruins stuff. Maybe I should have just postponed. We often go to gotquestions.org. This is like the Protestant database of Christian has question, Google's question, and tries to get question answered. Well, CatholicAnswers.com, Catholic.com, but I believe it's an organization called Catholic Answers that does a very similar thing. So I just wanted to briefly read a little bit of this because Purgatory is primarily a Catholic belief, but it's not that simple. And we're going to go through some of that too. The Catechism of the Catholic Church defines purgatory as a purification as to achieve the holiness necessary to enter the joy of heaven, which is experienced by those, quote, who die in God's grace and friendship, but still imperfectly purified. And then it gives a reference to where that's pulled from in the Catechism. It notes that, quote, this final purification of the elect is entirely different from the punishment of the damned. I find it interesting that the Catechism of the Catholic Church uses language like that. Always have. They use what is, I think, traditionally thought to be pretty Protestant, pretty Reformed language, using terms like the elect. The purification is necessary.
There should be a garbage can.
Uh-oh. Ghost, you're not muted.
Oh, sorry.
The garbage can. Patricia! It's good to see you. Glad you're here.
My phone actually said I was muted. What's going on? That's weird.
Your phone lied to you. Be careful. There's There's everybody. Sorry about the time change. Thank you all for working with me, though. David, good evening, all. Joe, thank you so much for leading this discussion. No matter what, we all love and admire you. I love and admire you guys. I don't often see my father, and he was around, so we got dinner with him. It was very nice. It was very nice. Tampa, greetings to all you fine people this evening. This should be good. This should be it. Anyways, if you just rolled in, similar to like we've done gotquestions.org a lot with some of the questions that we ask, because it's the default Google for Christians. This is a very similar thing. This is Catholic Answers. I just want to read this next paragraph too. This is kind of like the foundation, and then we'll go into the super high quality slideshow. The purification is necessary because, as Scripture teaches, nothing unclean will enter the presence of God in heaven. That's important. They have a reference to Revelation 21:27. And while we must die with our mortal sins forgiven, remembering that they have different levels of sin, right? Catholics, mortal sins, venial sins. There's at least one more. It's been a long time since I was in my Catholic uniform. There can still be many impurities in us, specifically venial sins. There you go. And the temporal punishment due to sins already forgiven. So just a little snapshot, I suppose. Very important. Yes. Craig. I just rolled in. Hey, Craig. Good to have you. So Purgatory. What is it? This is going to become a theme, I think. The Tuesdays are just going to be heretical guides to heresy. That's how I think I would like to label this. So who primarily accepts it? This is part 1 out of 3. Purgatory is a doctrine primarily associated with the Roman Catholic Church. Not entirely, but primarily. It refers to a state of purification for souls who have died in God's grace, but still need to be cleansed of venial sins. Important. Venial sins, or the temporal punishment due to sin before entering heaven. The idea is that while these souls are ultimately saved, they must undergo a process of sanctification to achieve the holiness required to be in God's presence. Pretty closely mirrors the Catholic Answers little synopsis there. Part 2 of this, of who primarily accepts it. The concept of purgatory is based on biblical passages like 2 Maccabees 12:44-46. If that doesn't sound like a familiar text, it shouldn't. Probably, maybe to some of you it does, but for most of you, probably shouldn't. Where prayers are offered for the dead, and 1 Corinthians 3:11-15, which should sound familiar, which speaks of a refining fire that tests a person's works. Works, not the grace, their works. The Catholic Church teaches that prayers, masses, and good works offered by the living can help souls in purgatory reach heaven more quickly. The third part to who primarily accepts it, everybody probably knows. Protestants will reject the idea of purgatory in most cases. Again, I wouldn't say all to anything, but in most cases, believing instead that Christ's sacrifice on the cross fully atones for the sin. So whereas the Catholic, the general, very generalized Catholic belief is that works are important. Protestants have, for the most part, abandoned this. And then also you have these levels of sin. And within the venial category, these sins, once you die, Jesus, the work done on the cross, the way the Protestants say it, the work done on the cross was not enough. In essence, they wouldn't say that, but that's essentially what they're saying. That's what they're insinuating. It's not enough. So once you die, you go to purgatory. And while individuals are in purgatory, while souls are in purgatory, those of us here can do more good works and essentially speed up those souls that are kind of trapped in purgatory and help them push along through the sanctification process. Eastern Orthodox Christians hold to a somewhat different understanding of the afterlife, often speaking of a process of purification, but not in the same structured way as purgatory. So it's a bit convoluted with the Orthodox. And from my understanding of Orthodoxy is Catholics have a pretty clear-cut, universal, I guess you might say, ironically, path to how they view and structure this process of death, purgatory, sanctification through purgatory, and then purity with God in heaven. My understanding is Orthodoxy is much more convoluted, where it really does depend on what Orthodox Christians you're talking to and from where, what culture. And I've gotten different answers. So Catholics kind of have a universal belief about it. Orthodox, in my opinion, have less of a universal belief about it. So more on scripture. We mentioned 1 Corinthians and 2 Maccabees. Maccabees is a part of the Apocrypha. So if it doesn't sound familiar, that's why. 2 Maccabees 12, 44 to 46. This is the prayers for the dead. This is where some of this comes from. What it says is, for if he were not expecting that those who had fallen would rise again, it would have been superfluous and foolish to pray for the dead. But if he was looking to the splendid reward that is laid up for those who fall asleep in godliness, it was a holy and pious thought. Therefore, he made atonement for the dead, so that they might be delivered from their sin. This is a big one. This is a really big one in terms of this topic, in terms of purgatory, where certain theological beliefs have been kind of formulated from. So what's being shown is that there was a Jewish concept of prayers for the dead. The suggestion is this belief in an immediate state where the dead could benefit from the prayers, the sanctification process, the speeding up from the people here to the people in purgatory. Obviously, this is not something you're going to find in a Protestant Bible, but you find another one that people do use, and that would be 1 Corinthians 3, 11 to 15, purification by fire. There are many, many, many interpretations of purification by fire. What it says is the verse. It says, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire. And the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that someone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. So here we've got a description of a refining fire that tests and then purifies a person's works, which the Catholics see as a metaphor for purgatory. So they believe this is talking about purgatory. On the Protestant end, I've seen many, many, many different interpretations of the verse, and in my opinion, none of them are entirely satisfactory. Oh, S-Mill made it. Hello in the locker room. Good for you, bro. Good to see you. What a nice little pop in. I'm glad you made it for 2 seconds. Enjoy the workout, man. Layman said, I think there's just two, mortal and venial. Is it just two? Okay. I thought there was a third for some reason. But if that's the case, that would make sense. So then you have mortal sins, which from a long time ago, but many years in the Catholic Church, and even this, like, you get different answers about, but what I was taught, I guess I'll say that, what I was taught in Catholic school for 8+ years was that mortal sins, there is no way to come back from them. They are the threshold where you are a lost soul. Venial sins require penance. So that would be like confession, saying your Hail Marys, praying, things like that. Mortal sins, lost cause. I wonder if that's changed, but that's what I was taught. That was the fear mongering I got in Catholic school, without a doubt. Craig said, I was wondering what the Orthodox think. Very convoluted is the best I can give you. I know if you Google it, you can find a few kind of standardized answers, and it seems relatively in line with Catholicism, but there are certain differences that definitely set it apart. But I don't see as much of a cohesive nature as the Catholics have with the concept of purgatory. It seems much more wishy-washy. Patricia said, it's interesting. Oh, interesting. Purification and purgatory are different things. Well, purification happens through purgatory. It's kind of the idea. So while in purgatory, you're going through the purification process, because the idea is that you cannot stand before God, or you cannot be in, I don't want to sound, I hope you guys know what I mean. You can't be in physical space with God if you are impure. I don't see it as that, because I see that as kind of a human belief, the physical space, but that's like the idea. That's the idea. Layman gave 1 Peter 1:17, and if you call on him as Father who judges impartially according to each one's deeds, conduct yourselves with fear throughout the time of your exile. Oh, I thought there was more. Okay. It's similar. Purgatory is a purification of sorts. Yeah, right. Correct. Catholic Apocrypha necessary? You mean for the topic? For sure. Without a doubt. I don't think you can honestly talk about purgatory without taking a Catholic perspective to some degree. It sounds like the Bema seat of Christ. Ghost said Jesus gives us a free gift of fire retardant, but some people choose gasoline. The fire comes for everyone, though. That's a good way to say that. Yeah. David gave 1 Corinthians 15:29. Otherwise, what do people mean by being baptized on behalf of the dead? If the dead are not raised at all, why are people baptized on their behalf? Let me actually pull this real quick. Hold on. Was 1529. So now if, wait, do I have the right? Yeah. Now, if there's no resurrection, what will those who are baptized for the dead? What will those do who are baptized for the dead? If the dead are not raised at all, why are people baptized for them? David, say more. Why'd you throw that out? I think I know, but I'm curious. That's a great verse to bring in, though. It's such a complicated topic, trying to make sense of it all. I don't know if this is one you can make sense of. It's very complicated. Craig said, is it heretical to think that no church really has much a clue what it's actually like on the other side? Craig, I say this every single day here, but you are also with a bunch of heretics. So we are not the right people to ask. I would speak for everybody in that sense. I don't think so at all. I think we talked about it before, but Google the word heretic, Craig. Google the word heretic and tell me that's not something you want to be. I want to be a heretic. The word has been demonized into something that it does not mean. The word heretic is not a negative word. It's a very good word. And I would say in the current state of Christianity today, being a heretic is probably the most positive thing you can be. Because what is today in Christian culture is broken, is busted, and in no way resembles what it once was. In my opinion. Layman said, oh, there's a different type of categorization that says there are three. Imputed, inherent, and personal different set. Okay. Either way, that's definitely not what I was thinking of. So I think you're right. I think it was just the two. I think you nailed it. I'm not sure why I thought there was a third. It's been a very long time. Ghost said I have a complicated view, but it's hard to put in words. I'm thinking. Well, you have plenty of time. Anti-Desert Dweller Brigade. Save the planet as the profile picture. Just says no. Yes. Craig said, a person holding an opinion at odds with what is generally accepted. Yes. So is that a bad thing today? I don't think so. I don't even think it was a bad thing in the first 6th century. I think everything was already corrupt at that point. Craig also said, I thought it meant Christian who is actually going to hell for a wrong thing. Right. That's why I told you to Google it. I kind of figured because of the way you asked that. Being a heretic just means you do not agree with what is generally accepted. That's all. So today, I feel very, very happy about being self-labeling myself, but also definitely being called that constantly by other people. I'm very happy with that because I don't think what is generally accepted is true. I don't think what is generally accepted is even good intentioned. I think a lot of it is very bad intention. And I think this started a very, very, very long time ago. And some of it we'll talk about tonight. So getting back to this, Matthew 12:32, forgiveness in the afterlife. This is another one that gets roped into this conversation. What it says is, and whoever speaks a word against the Son of Man will be forgiven, but whoever speaks against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven, either in this age or in the age to come. So some theologians will interpret this as implying the possibility of sins being forgiven after death, which you can see why they interpret it that way. It's one of those ones, okay, now aggregate. the text? Is this something that is taught repeatedly? Is this something we can interpret from other sections of Scripture? I think it becomes increasingly difficult, but there certainly are some places. The suggestion is that there's some kind of intermediate space. There is some kind of purgatory. Also, just a note. Some of that ties into Christian universalism to a point, and it's a verse that is used to varying degrees for Christian universalism. And then Revelation 21:27, nothing unclean in heaven, which makes sense because we've already touched on some of this stuff. What it says is, but nothing unclean will enter it, nor anyone who does what is detestable or false, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. So implication that some form of purification has to happen. It must take place prior to entering heaven. So where did it start and where did it go? And this, Craig, is one tiny little puzzle piece that will make you not feel bad about being a heretic. The Jewish roots. So we're in the pre-Christian era. So you put on your pre-Christian perspective goggles. The earliest, even just hints. So not well thought out, written, established theories. No, just hints of it, of the idea of purgatory. We already brushed on with 2nd Maccabees. This was a Jewish text written in the 2nd century. It describes Judas Maccabeus offering sacrifice for fallen soldiers so that their sins might be forgiven. It suggests a belief in an intermediate state where the dead could benefit from the prayers of the living. Some Jewish tradition also held beliefs in post-mortem purification, which likely influenced early Christian thought. Another note on this is that this was not specific to the Jewish and the Christian world. The Jewish now, but the Christian later. Like most things, it's not special. These ideas were held by other cultures. Egyptian culture had very similar concepts. They had post-mortem traditions that interacted with the afterlife. Like, this was not a new thing. This is not something the Jewish people made up. This is not something certainly the Christian people a very long time later made up. It just isn't. These are culturally known across a variety of cultures and across a variety of religions, obviously with that. Early Christian thought. So now we've jumped timeline quite a bit. 1st to 5th century. This is the Christian boom. So this is when theologians are becoming a thing. This is obviously post-Christ. This is when everything starts to happen. A lot of the stuff that we've been talking about recently. So like the boom of Gnosticism is here. The very early stages of the Roman Catholic movement is here. This is when all of this starts to really take. Marcion is here. Like, all of these things are kind of held within this 1 to 5 range. The New Testament does not explicitly mention purgatory. In fact, the Bible as a whole does not explicitly mention purgatory at all. But passages such as 1 Corinthians 3:11-15, which we read, the purification of fire, testing a person's works, which later theologians then linked to the idea of purgatory. Early church fathers like Tertullian, who I've been mentioning a lot recently because of all this stuff we've been talking about, your timeline range would be about 155 to 240 AD somewhere. And then Origen, who I've also mentioned a lot recently, 185 to 254-ish. They discussed ideas of this post-death purification process. These were some of the same people, Origen specifically, who were at the same time trying to destroy other views of Christianity. These are the same guys who were like, the easiest, best example would be the Gnostics. They were demonizing in real time all Gnostic thought, all Gnostic tradition, all of that theology, while formulating their own. And purification as a process post-death was one of those things. I just find it kind of ironic. Augustine would be roughly 354 to 430 AD, also mentions a purification or a purifying fire, like Paul mentioned, for some souls, and encourage prayer for the dead, reinforcing that idea of a state in between, of something that is akin to purgatory. Layman said post-death. Yes. Is it the term? Do you not like the term? Esmil said yes.
Oh, go ahead and read that.
I just said it said heretic literally means choice in Greek. But go ahead.
Oh, sure. Okay. Why do you think people pray for the dead? Like, what's the motivation to do that?
I don't think anything makes sense unless you believe in something post-death. I don't get it personally at all. I don't. It makes no sense to me. I get it
The
ideologically.
reason I think that you have a family member or whatever, and they got up to no good, but you love them to death, and they die. You're going to pray for them, thinking that you're going to somehow help them journey on. It's kind of like the Egyptians had similar ideas.
Right.
So if we are all in a body, so to speak, and this universe seems to be like some kind of filter to separate good from evil, why would you want to pray for the evil parts of your loved one? Wouldn't you want those parts to be burned up and the good parts of them be saved?
Right.
It just seems weird to me that you would pray for what? Pray for the evil parts of a person to be incorporated into God?
Well,
I'm trying to understand.
I think their idea is that they're praying it away. So like from what I understand, anybody who thinks, you know, has a different idea, then obviously speak up. But my understanding of it is like, if I died today and Kat knew, you know, I had these sins on me that I hadn't gone, especially you like, we have to keep in mind the Catholic perspective is I can't just pray tonight and get rid of that sin, like purify myself. I have to go to church. I have to talk to a priest. I have to talk to somebody. I need an intermediary. Like that's what the Catholics believe. So if I were to die today and Kat knew I had some sin lying on me, then Kat would pray while I sat in purgatory that sin would be washed. I could become pure and I could move on to be with God. That's in a nutshell what I understand of the idea. I don't think, at least I'm not aware of them like praying to bring it with. It's to like strip it from them.
Okay, yeah, that could have just been a misinterpreting on my part.
Maybe, but I'll think about it. That's what I get. But anybody else like layman, if you know or you have heard different, let me know. But that's my understanding from like when I was in Catholic church. But that was a very long time ago, so I'm very open to being wrong. But that's the idea from what I get, is that they're praying to remove the things you could not remove yourself. So whatever you were not able to get rid of, they're trying to get rid of it. But no matter what, I think it's flawed thinking. And I think if you spend 10 minutes trying to really lay out the logic of it, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense. To me, it has a lot of pitfalls, personally.
Yeah, same. I'm still trying to make sense of it. Like it seems like the harrowing of hell was is that purgatory? Like is purgatory just being in Sheol before the second coming, so to speak?
That's the question, and I've got some of that here too. So when we get there, maybe we talk about it. Near the end, I compared like purgatory to hell, purgatory to Sheol, the best I could. And there's the information is just not great, but the best I could. So yeah, we'll get into that too for sure, because I have the same question. I think it's hard to say.
Sweet.
Layman said, "Dude, then what's the difference between heretic and heterodox?" I'll leave that for someone. Patricia, I like the concept of purgatory because it provides further grace after you die to your human body, one last chance. Or more chances than we can perceive with our teeny brains. Hold on. I like the concept of purgatory because it provides further grace after you die to your human body. I don't think that's the idea, though. I think that when the human body dies, it's dead. from what I understand, very open to being wrong, but from what I remember, and obviously like I did my due diligence with this, but I could not grasp 100% of the topic. But from what I remember from being in that world was your human body is worthless, especially once you die. But what you're getting is what you were not able to cleanse yourself of through confession, through praying the rosary, like all your penance would be the term the Catholics would use. If you're not able to pay penance to cleanse yourself and you die in a state of sin. And so if you die in the state of sin, you would go to purgatory. There are others that will say, no matter what, everybody goes to purgatory. And then you go through this cleansing process no matter what. But the more Christians that pray for you through that process, the quicker you go through the process. The other camp is what I was used to, which is whatever you had not cleansed yourself of, whatever penance you hadn't paid, that is what you had on your back when you got to purgatory. So then in purgatory, whoever's praying for you is praying for that penance to be done, for that sanctification process, so that you could be fully cleansed and you could move on to God. I don't know if I see it like a second chance. That's more of like Christian universalism. That's not true. I don't remember what it's called, but it's similar to Christian universalism. Christian universalism, in a nutshell, everybody goes to heaven, no matter what. But there's something else there. Maybe it's an offshoot of it. I don't quite remember, but you get a second chance after death, where you get to like play the game further, or like you die, like in World of Warcraft, for nobody, because I know nobody plays that game anymore. But you die and you're basically a ghost. But if you can find your body, you're alive again. They kind of believe, in a sense, that once you die, you kind of get a second chance. And then if you finish the second chance, then you're good. And where the heck are we? I missed something there. David said, I think it relates to our subject, as Paul is not confirming this is true, but is asking pre-purgatory believers why they are baptized for the dead if there is no life after death. Okay, yeah, I think it's a good point. It was a good verse to throw out. David threw out earlier, 1 Corinthians 15:29, for anybody who's interested. It was a good one to throw out, for sure. Patricia said, I think they're praying for Jesus to save them through purgatory after death. I don't think that's true. For the Catholics, I don't think that's quite true. And I don't really want to say more. I don't see that, I guess, is what I would say. And I didn't see it when I was in the Catholic Church either. It seems a lot more praying towards other things through that process. Unfortunately, I would say. Layman said, post-death, like death is what happens here, but not to subjective conscious experience. Like death is a relational concept, I think. Oh. You might have to try to word that differently, at least for me. My brain didn't process that fully. Like death is just here. I don't know. I guess one of the things you have to differentiate is this, because like everybody's saying death a lot. Death is like the most unimportant part about this. I would think about that. Like the human death is almost irrelevant. The vessel is gone, so what? It's entirely irrelevant. It's entirely irrelevant. Once your human body dies, so what? It has no weight in the idea of purgatory. And from what I understand, it has no weight in the concept of hell or the concept of heaven or the concept of Sheol. Happy for an argument, but I don't see the human body, the vessel, have anything to do with any of them. It's discarded. Upon physical death, the soul moves on. The human body becomes waste. So unless I'm misunderstanding that, which you can definitely clarify if I am. David said, also purgatory could be a church moneymaker if offering could help their loved ones exit purgatory. It's funny you say that, because there was exactly that throughout parts of early Christian history. I won't name the church. We've already talked about them tonight. That was a real thing. People would buy their way out of sin because the church told them they could. That is a real part of Christian history, which is by sometimes being a heretic is not a negative thing. Ruth said, didn't Jesus' death on the cross take away the sin? Right. Well, that's the idea. And that's the Protestant idea. So like during the Reformation, when the Protestants split, that was what they then carried on. And the Catholics kind of kept their view, which is that on one hand, they will say that the death of Jesus was enough, but in practice, they prove that it is not. Otherwise, what they do makes no sense. So it's speaking out of the both side of your mouth type scenario. Whereas most Protestants say that yes, the death was enough. That was the whole point of Jesus. And the Bible's pretty clear about it. It's like the point of Jesus, the point of the Messiah, was to wipe away the sins of the earth. Quote, unquote. Mikkel, good to see you. Oh, the lovely cat. Richard said, I mean, like it gives your soul further grace after you die. I suppose, but does it? But does it? I feel like it almost strips you of grace after you die. I don't know. I would have to think about that. I've never thought about it from that perspective. Giving your soul further grace after you die. Or you could just go straight to heaven because Jesus died on the cross. So I guess it depends on your starting perspective. If your starting perspective is a Protestant, the idea of purgatory is rough because you're like, okay, well, my understanding was Jesus was nailed to a piece of wood because I'm hopeless so that I can go to heaven. The Catholic view is like Jesus brutally died on a piece of wood, but also you're going to go sit in purgatory for a while. And maybe if everybody prays enough, you'll only be here for a bit. And if people don't pray quite enough on earth, then you'll probably be here for a while. So get comfortable. So I don't know. I guess that's a very interesting way to look at it. And I guess it would really depend on like your starting perspective, in my opinion. Ghost answered the question that I chose not to. Said heretic and heterodox are words like Satan. They mean nothing without further context. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Craig said Protestants going to be in purgatory for a long time. Layman said purgatory is 3 possibilities. It can be satisfaction, interesting, sanctification, or both. Satisfaction is retributive. Sanctification is rehabilitative. That's really interesting. That's one I'm going to sit on for a minute and copy into my notes. That's an interesting way to look at that. Satisfaction is retributive. Sanctification is rehabilitative. It's very interesting. Ruth said, do we cleanse ourselves or did God do that? Well, that is the question. That's the question. Catholics will say God did it, but in practice, they will prove that they do not believe that we do. First, the priest has to cleanse you. You have to. You can't just go to Jesus. You have to have an intermediary. You have to have somebody on your behalf go to Jesus, somebody more woo-woo spiritual than you, which is why you have something like confession. And then the priest tells you, he gives you penance to perform. And then you can perform and cleanse yourself. Most Protestants believe that the cleansing happened on the cross and all you have to do is just not be an asshole the rest of your life and you're good. So you have different trains of thought, Move, I got this. Said your sins will put you through purgatory or hell on earth, or you can do it God's way and live in the kingdom of heaven here on earth. Interesting. So do you literally think that purgatory is, do you literally think purgatory and hell are earth? Like, do you think that's what we're living now? And I'm not being sarcastic because I know people who genuinely believe that. So I'm glad you said it because there are people who certainly believe that. Tampa said, I've never gone into what purgatory is in detail until tonight. All I knew was that Catholics believed it and it was like a waiting room between heaven and hell. I'm trying to make sense of it. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to catch up and I'm realizing there's no world in which I'm going to catch up. So if anything super good pops up in the comments, I hope Ghost will rudely interrupt me so I can get to it. But y'all are being too fast tonight. Otherwise, we're never going to get through any of this. So the last we did 1st to 5th century. This would be the early Christian zone of reality where Christianity was really booming. Parts of Christianity were being demonized. Parts of Christianity were taking root. Primarily what was happening was you had the smaller sects of Christianity, because there were denominations, we're just like scholars don't call them that at this time, but you had something like Gnosticism that was being demonized by what was becoming the early Catholic Church. These Tertullian, Origen, Augustine, these guys would plant the seeds for what would then later become the Catholic Church. And in doing so, this is what, when we talked about the Gospels, when we talked about Marcion, I use the term like this was a rhetoric war. What Christianity became what it became, not, in my opinion, not because of God, because of rhetoric. Who had the better rhetoric? The winner writes the history book. And that's exactly what we see with Christianity. It's no different. So this was that period. After this, you have the medieval development. This would be from like the 6th century to the 12th century. By the early medieval period, the concept of purgatory became more structured. So it's now more than seeds. Tertullian, Augustine, Origen planted the seeds that later grew into this. The term purgatorium began to be used in the Latin Church. So truly taking root and then flourishing. Gregory the Great, which would be 540 to 604 AD, wrote about a temporary place of purification for souls before heaven, and his teachings influenced later doctrine. By the 12th century, theologians like Peter Lombard and Thomas Aquinas further refined the idea, describing purgatory as a place of cleansing fire. So they're pulling from that 1 Corinthians verse. Just like everything else, we have, in some cases like purgatory, a little snippet of a verse, and it later over time grows into something astronomically bigger than what it was. And then when you take something like purgatory and you say, okay, where every single possible scenario, how do I steel man the concept of purgatory? Good luck. Good luck. There's not a lot at all. And especially if you're going to restrict yourself to the canon, to what we've decided is only God's law, the true word of God. If you're only going to use that, you're not going to make sense of purgatory. It is not going to happen. Guaranteed. And if you do, then you're in serious trouble. Because if all you need is one verse from 1 Corinthians that in no way speaks clearly about this concept of purgatory, if that's all you need to develop something like the concept of purgatory, you can make anything make sense. If that is all you need, I can make endless doctrine using that low of a bar in order to make a concept. I hope that makes sense. It's a very, very, very dangerous way to practice exegesis and hermeneutics and theology. It's very, very, very dangerous. Official doctrine in Catholic Church, this is when it's completely taken root and is absolutely flourishing between the 13th and the 16th century. The doctrine of purgatory was officially defined at the Second Council of Leon in 1274 and reaffirmed at the Council of Florence in 1439. The Catholic Church taught that prayers, indulgences, this is for David, when you were mentioning, I figure sarcastically, but the buying and selling of spiritual things, I guess you'd say, indulgences were sold by the Catholic Church. This is just a fact. It's not a pretty fact, but it's fact. So prayers, indulgences, and masses for the dead could help souls in purgatory. The sale of indulgences, pardons to reduce time in purgatory, became controversial, leading to the Protestant Reformation. So David made a joke. The joke is absolutely true. You could buy your way through purgatory. And if that is not corruption, baby girl, I don't know what is. And then you had the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, where Martin Luther between 1483 and 1546 and other reformers rejected purgatory outright, arguing that Christ's atonement was sufficient. So Ruth, there you go. Christ's atonement was sufficient and that there was no biblical basis for the teaching, because there really isn't. The Council of Trent in 1545 to 1563 reaffirmed purgatory as Catholic doctrine, rejecting Protestant objections. The Council of Trent being a Catholic thing. essentially a Catholic thing. Separating, oh, hold on. Go said, faith without works is dead, is like heads without tails. Fails to be a coin. The concept of coin dies. That's great. Separating faith and works is impossible, in my opinion. We try to separate the inseparable way too much. Yes. Yeah. I could not agree more. It's a nonsensical idea. Modern Catholic understanding, to finish the timeline, the modern Catholic understanding. The Catholic Church still holds on to the idea of purgatory, but in some senses has moved away from the over-literal depiction of it as a fiery place. If you look up, like I did, and I put some pictures up here throughout, but almost all of the artists' renditions of purgatory, it looks like hell. Straight up. I don't see any differentiation between what is depicted as purgatory and just absolute hell. The literal artistic version of hell. It is now often described as a spiritual purification rather than a specific location. So not somewhere you go, but something you go through. The concept remains controversial among Christian denominations, with Protestants largely rejecting it, while Catholics maintain it as a part of their tradition. All right, next section. So let me just flip through here quickly and see if I missed anything. Move, I got this, said, we are being made in the image of God. This is just the process and it won't be finished in this life. I mostly agree with that. Yeah. Mostly. For the most part. To me, it seems... Ghost said, to me, it seems like the purpose of this reality is to separate good from evil through a system of rule and free will. The separation happens here on Earth or Sheol, so after death is irrelevant, in my opinion. Purgatory seems to be here and now. I for the most part, lean this way. If purgatory as a concept is a thing, I would be more surprised if purgatory was not this. But in no way do I view it or function under the concept of like Catholic purgatory. I don't think it, but this idea of like you are going through the way I was described is like either training or preparation, which are often contextually the same, depending on how they're being used. But I view this reality, this world, as a training ground, essentially. I think that something happens after. I think that whatever happens after is much more than I could ever even begin to conceptualize or try to understand. But one thing I believe about all of that is that this is kind of the weeding out of souls who will not be able to perform. So if you look at it like a job where you have 100 people join a company and the company has a goal, but none of the employees know what the goal is. The CEO knows what the goal is. But the CEO hires 100 people, and for 10 years, 20 years, they all work there, and he gives them different tasks over the years. And he sees their skills, or he watches them develop certain things. And over time, the CEO knows which people are going to be able to perform which things in his master plan, of which they have no idea what's going on. In a very, very simple way, I kind of view it in a similar manner, which I know is not so much I wouldn't say it is not a Christian belief, but I would also say it's not a Christian belief, if that makes sense. Go said, if the word exists in every dimension of reality, why wouldn't it? And if we are reading the word while in purgatory, it can be confusing. We have the map, but lack the you are here icon. As usual, that's a fantastic way to say that. I really like that. Yeah. That's a saver right there. That's real good. Ruth said, I believe we pay for our sins while here on earth. In a sense, for sure. In a sense, for sure. But then Ruth, what about people who... See, all this stuff is way too deep. So that if you pay for your sins here on earth, is that just for Christians? Or would you apply that to all humans, whether they're Christian or not? And if somebody's not Christian, can they commit sin? I think most of us would answer like yes. Whether you know it or not, a sin is a sin because it's just morality. But then what is hell? If we pay for our sins while here on earth, do you not believe in hell? Or is that a different thing? Or I'd be curious. S. Mill said pride seems like a venial sin, but some Catholic theologians said pride is the deadliest of the 7 sins. Yes, they did, in fact. My understanding is that pride is... What is that, actually? Because that was something... Ooh. What was that out of? The 7 deadly sins. That's what that was from. The 7 deadly sins. Pride, also known as hubris, is considered the original and worst of the 7 deadly sins on almost every list. The most demonic. It is also thought to be the source of the other capital sins. And that is the word that I was trying to think of, layman. Pride is the opposite of humility. I say this with only partial confidence, but if I remember correctly, pride was used in the 7 deadly sins as one of, if not the worst, because of the things that stem from pride. That it acts as kind of this foundation of worser sins, where if somebody is prideful, they are more likely or guaranteed to fall into other sins. And therefore it becomes kind of a cascade. But I only say it with partial confidence. I don't fully remember what the deal behind that was. Layman said, also agree, Ghost. That's like the thing Jordan Peterson says about how what we really believe is manifest in the way we behave. Yeah, we've talked about that a lot. Who you are is what you do. That's the bottom line. What you say as a person is irrelevant. People's words, I've learned, it's probably the most helpful lesson I've learned in life, like from business to relationships to anything, is that what somebody says is irrelevant. I don't care at all what somebody says. And thank God, like hiring and firing and dealing with employees taught me that really hard, because I took people at their word way too much. And now I don't take anybody at their word ever because of exactly that. Who you are is what you do in every possible sense. Your behavior is who you are. What you say you believe in is irrelevant. What somebody talks about on a podcast for an hour is irrelevant, because so many of those people do not live that out. They don't behave it. They just talk about it, which is depressing and embarrassing once you learn that about somebody. Gordon, not a local, but a term. What was that in reference to? Tampa said the walk by faith idea implies work, right? The thing is, to me, the thing is, if you have experienced this concept of God, how could it not change your behavior? That's what I've always said. So I won't rant like I normally do, but I don't understand how somebody could experience God, not the idea of God, not went to church and had an emotional moment and then went back to their normal life, but come to the full rational realization, which with maybe some emotion too, but the rational realization, like, holy shit, that's real. This is real. And not dramatically changed the trajectory of their life. I don't think it's possible. That's my 2 cents. Exactly. Ghost said hardware, software, dynamic. I wish Christians would stop arguing about whether hardware is more important than software. It's lame. Yeah, it's dynamic. Yeah. There's how focusing on one more than the other is annoying. Because they can't exist independent of one another. In some systems, at least. Pride in the name of love, Mikkel said. I think that would probably be positive pride, though, right? I think pride can be positive. Pride is, in many cases, I would say is positive. But negative pride is damaging and damning, and usually causes somebody to cascade down down a path of many, many additional sins, it seems like. David said purgatory and purification just have to be the same because they both begin with because they both begin with a P. Example of modern exegesis of scripture. I am screenshotting that and saving that forever. That's so good, David. Ooh, that's so good. David, I need your express written permission to post that to social media. That's so funny. That's so accurate. That's so wildly accurate. Go set airtight logic. Interesting. Okay, what is the difference between purgatory and hell? So these correspond left to right. So purgatory is a temporary state of purification for souls who are ultimately saved but need to be cleansed before entering heaven. Whereas hell is a place of eternal punishment for those who have rejected God and die in a state of unrepentant sin. Purgatory is temporary. Souls there will eventually enter heaven after their purification is complete, whereas hell is eternal. There is no escape or second chance for those condemned to hell. Purgatory is for saved souls who need purification before heaven because, again, Jesus on the cross was not enough. Whereas hell is for the damned, meaning those who die separated from God by mortal sin. Because, again, we're in the Catholic context. So mortal sins you cannot come back from. Mortal sins lead to hell. Venial sins, if penance is paid, you can come back from. And you could go to purgatory. Then from purgatory, you can go to heaven. But also from purgatory, you can go to hell, depending on which Catholics you're talking to. So purgatory, your fate is not fully determined yet, at least from what I understand from my time with the Catholics. Purgatory involves suffering, but it is a purifying pain, not one of despair. The souls there are joyful because they know they will enter heaven. Whereas hell involves eternal suffering, separation from God, and no hope of redemption. Hopeless, baby girl. Purgatory is supported by passages like 1 Corinthians 3:11-15, which speaks of a refining fire that burns away imperfections. Again, because it's the only canonical verse that you can make purgatory make even a lick of sense with. One would argue that even that is not a valid way to build a theological structure of anything. But on the other end of that, hell is explicitly mentioned multiple times, numerous times, from Matthew to Revelation, as a place of eternal punishment for the wicked. What is the difference between purgatory and Sheol? Purgatory is a later Christian doctrine, primarily in Roman Catholicism, describing temporary state of purification for souls who are saved but need cleansing before entering heaven. Sheol is a Hebrew concept from the Old Testament, referring to the realm of the dead where both the righteous and the wicked go. It's a key difference biblically, and I say that loosely because Sheol has a biblical backing and purgatory really doesn't. It is often described, Sheol is often described as a shadowy, neutral underworld rather than a place of punishment or reward. Also, rather than a place of penance paid. Purgatory is specifically for saved souls who are undergoing purification before heaven, so on their way, whereas Sheol is a general afterlife where all the dead reside, often described as a place of silence, forgetfulness, and separation from God. Biblical backing is found in a number of places, but two of them are the Psalmist and then in Ecclesiastes. Purgatory is developed from passages like 2 Maccabees, which is not a Protestant book, so you don't get to use it unless you're a Catholic, and 1 Corinthians 3:11-15, which I've said many times, and I'll say it again, is not a good backing for a theory like this. It's very, very, very loose. Whereas Sheol is mentioned all the time, often in the Old Testament. From Genesis to Job, we just read it a few times in Job, to Psalm and beyond. It's also found in extra canonical Jewish texts, so outside of the canon. But you don't need to rely on them because it's found plenty in the canon. Purgatory is unique to Catholic tradition and has no direct equivalent in ancient Jewish beliefs. There were similar mentions of it in some Jewish writing, but it wasn't the same from what I remember. It was not the same, and it was in such low volume compared to other things that it's not worth even using them as a backing. Whereas the New Testament, Sheol evolves into this concept of Hades. So Sheol of the Old Testament, meaning Sheol to the Jews, was one thing. Sheol then does kind of go through this very minor, but it's there, an evolution into what is described as Hades, with distinctions between the bosom of Abraham, which was a place of comfort for the righteous, and a place of torment for the wicked, like Luke 16:19-31 explains. And I think that's a wrap on everything I got. Yeah, beautiful. All right, so it's open. So I'll try to catch up on some of this stuff. Y'all were too fast, which I guess is a good thing. If you want me to go back to any slides so you can read them again, just remind me what it was, and I'll happily go back.
I am by no means an expert on this topic, so I just typed a lot tonight because I can kind of think better when I'm writing it out.
Oh, yeah.
But I know a lot more about the hell thing, but this is like another level, man. It's hard to know. We don't have enough information on it.
That's the thing. Yeah, it's a great example, in my opinion, of a scenario where I think it seems to be that they wanted something to be true, and there were a couple loose mentions of it. And to be fair, from the Catholic perspective, these are both canon. So Second Maccabees is canon, First Corinthians is canon. And if this was a concept that had become popularized through tradition, because I feel like modern Christians have blinders on, and we only see Christianity and spirituality through the concept or through the perspective of the Bible, and that's just not how it. That's not how it was. Like, nobody had a freaking Bible. Nobody had a Bible for a long time. Nobody had a Bible. There were little documents being thrown around and whatever, but it was mostly people telling stories. So it's perfectly plausible to me that during the first couple centuries, maybe a little before, but unlikely, the first couple centuries, theologians are becoming a thing, and writings are starting to happen. And all of this is on the back of oral tradition, 100%. It was perfectly plausible to me that this theory develops that after you die, you go somewhere first. And as that develops, when we start to get these texts, it makes sense to me that, like, I get where they're coming from with 1 Corinthians 3:11-15. I get it. It's loose to me, but I get it. 2 Maccabees 12:44-46. I get it. Like, that one's much more direct too. Like, that one, I get you could develop a theory. But if that's all you have, I don't get, why don't we do that with anything else? Because we could make up all kinds of doctrine and all kinds of beliefs and all kinds of crazy stuff if all we need is a verse or two, one direct and one very indirect. It's one of the things that's so interesting about Christian culture is that most people look at this and are like, either that's crazy or that's normal. And I think no matter which perspective you take, they're both wrong. Because if you talk crap about purgatory because of the loose backing of it, that's how a lot of Protestants have developed our concepts too. Like, we could tear apart a lot of our stuff too. We just choose not to. And if you just accept it, it's very loose. It puts me in a place of, like, this is why I question 100% of everything and don't feel confident about anything at all. Sorry for that long rant, but it's a great example.
Isn't there a Bible verse that says God knew us before we were born?
Yeah, I think
I can't remember.
Yeah, Jeremiah.
Okay, so is being born dying because that would support this being purgatory. We're dying to some kind of nature, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess you could. It's Jeremiah 1:5. If this is one you're talking about. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I think there might be another one too, but sure, like any one of them. So number one, what does know mean? How did we exist before? We existed in the mind of God, which I think we already do. So it's like we just entered a new phase. And every time you enter a new phase, it's a type of death of the prior phase. So if this is the purgatory phase, it would make sense.
I agree with it, like at the foundation. I don't see it as like this is us trying to sanctify, though, if that makes sense. So I think this could be, if you were to like strip the idea of purgatory, where it is just what you said, where if we existed in some facet prior to this life and then died, and then this is where we are now, the in between, and then when we die, we'll be at the next life. I agree with that actually too. I agree with that. That's how I kind of see it. I don't see it as though this is meant for us to go through a purification process per se, I guess, myself.
So what would that process even look like if this isn't it?
I don't know if there is one. The at least like as it's described in something like purgatory, I don't believe that exists. But even beyond that, so I think that's problematic for somebody who believes that Jesus Christ did wash away the sins of the world. I think this idea of purgatory becomes problematic. I think they become conflicting theological views. Wouldn't you say?
Well, if washing away the sins of the world has some type of metaphysical mechanism process where like there's a step one, step two, step three, then we could be focusing on one of the steps and not all of the steps.
So, okay. So
I think
fair.
something Layman said is good. We're constantly shedding what is not of God, and that seems to be like a multi-phased or a multi-step process.
I agree with that. I think if you're a biblical absolutist, I think that's problematic. But I agree with that. Yeah. I certainly see it that way. I think it's a never ending thing. I think you go through phases. And I think just through experience, I think most people would admit that's what it is. Like as a pastor who's worked with people for a long time and then stop being a pastor, but still like from the perspective of a pastor deal with people, I don't see anything but that. But I think biblically that'd be a little bit problematic if the Bible is your end all be all.
Well, yeah, it's not mine, but it is kind of like a hub, if you want to call it that. Um, and I like to study all the spokes that can connect to that hub, but it is kind of like the central place where I ground all my ideas.
Yeah,
Um,
100% for sure. I think you and I
but
are the
yeah,
same
like
in that regard. Like the Bible is a massive source and surely inspired in some way. I don't think, and I mean correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think either of us thinks everything in the Bible is perfect or literal or is exactly as it should be. But it's probably the greatest resource we have in terms of trying to figure things out. That's how I see it.
yeah, I agree.
So therefore, we can like have this conversation of like that idea of sin that Layman put out. I think that, and probably everybody here, because I don't think anybody would listen to what we talk about otherwise. But where we see something like what he described sin as, which I think is super accurate, and I think in practice we all like we witness that, we watch that, we see that. That's reality. These processes of sin, the shedding of the layers of sin, versus somebody who says every verse in the Bible means exactly what it says it means, which already doesn't work. But that's a huge portion of people. And I think these types of concept, like that type of concept about sin, I think is impossible to make cohesive with the Bible. I think if you're somebody who like reads all this stuff and then reads extra canonical texts and tries to like aggregate all this data, I think you would find that that's taught more than anything else is that idea of sin. And I think that would apply to a bunch of other things too, for sure.
I think any church that is opposed to aggregation is immediately a false church,
Mm,
and
without a
a
doubt.
lot of them are opposed to it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm so cynical. I feel like it's most. But maybe
Probably is most. Yeah, I think you're right. It is most.
I just don't see that. I think I just can't. I would love to see the church that does even like 10% of kind of like how we've all chosen to approach this stuff. 10%, where you'll at least open up to another perspective of something or a different interpretation of something, even if they give their own opinion with it. I just have never really seen that. It's always very narrowed. It's always very pigeonholed to this is the truth. And I think that is why we're here. And Purgatory is a great example of it, where that is very obviously what happened with the concept. Somebody got the idea and did what Christians do and moved it, and it moved well. And so they won that rhetoric war, regardless of the fact that there's nothing to base it off of at all, really. It's an interesting idea, though, for sure.
Yeah, we can infer some knowledge, but like it's through like a very circuitous route of science and studying all the different sciences and philosophies and whatnot. And then you can kind of paint a little picture, but we still don't really know because we can't come back from death
Right.
unless you factor in NDEs and stuff like that. So who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's interesting too, is some of the, like, we had a girl on a couple weeks ago who was talking about people who died and came back. I don't remember, but she said a few interesting things. And I find those interesting as somebody who believes zero of them, because I am the biggest cynic in the room. But I love the idea of that being true. Like, I love the idea of somebody crossing that threshold and being able to experience or see or whatever sense, and then come back. I can't even imagine the life-changing perspective you have to have if that actually happened to you. But otherwise, yeah, I think like these are all, what do you even do with these kinds of ideas unless you're trying to get something out of people? Like the Catholic Church literally took money to push people through purgatory for other people. So if my mom died and I wanted to move her through purgatory, I could pay for that through the Catholic Church. It didn't last long, to be fair, but it is absolutely something that happened. And in that case, I get it. Like I get the motivation. Outside of that, I don't quite get it, unless you truly believe it. My problem with the Catholic view of it is that I don't think they actually believe it, because they can't have both. You can't believe that Jesus' work on the cross truly did all of that, and that upon calling on the name of Jesus, and then also in their perspective doing good work, which I am in agreement with, you have earned your place in heaven. You can't believe that and also believe that, well, when you die, everybody here also has to make sure to do all this stuff on your behalf for you to push through purgatory. Like, you can't have both logically. So I struggle with them over that. Like, which one do you actually believe? Which is the truth from your perspective?
Yeah, I got nothing. I'm trying to read through the comments.
I know, me too. And I do have to roll soon. So any last minute stuff, any burning desires? Ruth said, I was brought up and being told I was going to hell for this, that, and the other sins I did. Talk about a complex. Then I learned what the Bible really said. Right. It also, yeah, I don't know. This is so hard. It's so hard because we have so much evidence in the Bible for this idea that Christians could never possibly ever go to hell. But we also have a lot of evidence that Christians can absolutely go to hell. Like 1 John 3, if you ever get a minute, or tonight maybe as your nighttime reading, if you want to go to bed, feeling very convicted, read 1 John 3, the whole thing. It's not very long. Read that, because that's written to Christians. We have every reason to believe it's written to Christians. And I just read it to Kat last night because I like to read her sweet nothings as we go to sleep. But 1 John 3 is very brutal truth about those who continue to live in sin are of the devil. You're going to hell. You are damned. You cannot be of Christ and continue to live the way you're living. It's extremely clear. 3 John, similar stuff.
It doesn't. It's just people don't understand the two sides of the coin analogy.
Right. It's the splitting of it. So like and we've talked about it ad nauseum, but like it went from one side of the coin to the other side of the coin. All it was the one side, the fire, the burn, and then it moved to the other side, which is the grace and nothing at all. First, it was all you had to do was work, and you were saved. Nothing about grace. And then it moved to grace, and you have to do absolutely nothing at all. I think, like I said, and I'm sure a lot of y'all agree to some degree, is that like they don't function without each other. And if you have the one, you have the other. And if you don't have one, then you probably don't have the other. I don't see them functioning separate from each other at all. I don't see how they could. Theologically, I don't see how they could. But if you split them, you can argue for both, for sure. You can argue for the grace and you can argue for the works. You can argue for Christians never losing their salvation. You can sure as hell argue that Christians can lose their salvation. And it's because the coin thing isn't, I've never looked at it like that, but it's because you're only looking at one side of the coin. In my opinion, that's how I see it.
Well, sorry, earlier when I was talking about the coin, I'm just talking about the software and hardware. Like you can't separate those. And they're just built into reality. What came first, the chicken or the egg? It's a stupid question. The system came first. And people try to separate the inseparable and they go off in these weird denominations and whatnot because one says it's this and one says it's that, but it has to be both, and they're not getting it.
Right. But I think it boils down to humans doing what humans do. And it's like what we see with politics, even, where oftentimes the truth is in the middle, or oftentimes what is right is in the middle. And groups of people become so polarized that even if deep down they know what's in the middle, they'll pick an extreme side. And I haven't seen Christianity as anything other than that. From the very beginning, anything, the Origin, the Tertullian, the Augustine, all of them. It was the Gnostics, the Marcionites. It was almost always, all or nothing. And if it wasn't, even on the things they would agree on, they'd then pick a verse to focus on, and they would be in opposition to one another. And nobody would just sit in the middle. Like, I take a lot of pride in how I think everybody here approaches it, because I think almost everybody here sits in the middle. But everybody here is very open to seeing the system, to use that term. Everybody here, I feel like, sees the system for what it is, and is not just in a very dumb manner focused on the chicken or the egg. Everybody's like, F the chicken, F the egg. How the hell does this thing work? What is the actual function? Before that, like, who gives a shit? Which of the chicken or the chicken or egg came first? Like, how did the system? How does it function? How does it run? Where did the chicken and the egg as a concept come from in the first place? And I just don't think a lot of people do that, whether it's religion or whether it's politics or anything at all, I guess, really.
Yeah, well, thinking is a lost art.
It's very true.
But yeah, it has to be a system, a self-perpetuating system of reproduction. So there's always going to be this component of chicken and egg. Everything shares that kind of dual nature.
Right.
Works in faith. I mean, it's just, you can't escape it.
No. Yeah, I don't think you can. I don't think there's any way to at all.
Which is the Ouroboros. It's the snake eating its tail. It just goes on and on. You can't resolve it.
Yeah. And I mean that,
in my opinion,
no, I think you're right. And I think anybody who's spent a lot of time in philosophy and in different philosophical problems that ends up being the truth of a lot of them, is that they're insolvable. They're self-perpetuating cycles. Yeah. I think it's brutally the truth.
I think it was supposed to be that way, though.
I completely agree. Yeah. I think it's part of why I'm so cynical. It's because I see it that way. But I think I see it that way much more harshly than a lot of people do. And it doesn't make me hopeless, but it makes me feel like
So
I
I
will
have a
never.
question.
Yeah, go.
If it's unsolvable, is that knowledge that it's unsolvable, is that solving the thing? Because if it's supposed to be unsolvable and you know that, then haven't you solved it?
That's exactly
That
how
could
I
be
see it. Yeah.
okay.
I
Kind of
assume
how I
you're
see it.
joking, but that's exactly how I see it. Yeah. I think the acknowledgement and the truth, the acknowledgement of the reality that, and I say it all the time and everybody argues with me, but like, I do not think the human mind is capable of conceiving most of this. I don't think it is possible. I think we're able to conceive and understand certain pieces of the puzzle. And I think we're able to conceive and understand of enough to grasp a general concept or a general outline of the machine. I do not in any way at all think we are capable as humans at all of grasping fully the machine. I don't think it's written in code we understand. I don't think it's written in code that we could understand. The software, I guess, in that case. I don't think the computer is built in such a manner that we could grasp what the stuff, it's materials we've never seen, it functions in a way we've never seen, and we could never understand it, even if we were to gain that much knowledge. This is one of the things that I definitely like. I like the Gnostics for. They said it and they meant it. Whereas Christians say it, they say God is outside of our understanding, and then they describe him to you. It's asinine. It's ridiculous. He's so great. He's so powerful. We can never even begin to understand him.
Too, though?
In a sense, but they constantly would, from what we understand, to be fair, because everything was burned and destroyed. But it seems as though they pushed very, very hard this idea of God is completely outside of our conception. What we do know, they would say, is that the only way to escape this is through gnosis, is through knowledge and understanding. I do not know of anything even remotely similar to like what the Jews and the Christians did around trying to describe and understand God through a human perspective. So in a very small sense, yes, but I'd say almost no in comparison to Christians and Judaism. I think it was very different. They were all about God being too big. It's too big. It's not even worth trying to figure out.
So big. So trying to think. Too big a concept or too big as far as size?
Just literally, like if you, it's so hard to, I guess I said it so many times, I feel so annoying, but we like, it's not possible for us to understand something we haven't experienced with our senses. Like that's how humans function. Their view of God was like, God is so far removed from what is sensible, from what is something you could even experience, to the point that it's literally not possible for humans to experience God in that manner, to grasp.
I think it's because their ontology of God is a little different. I think they're experiencing God every time they blink their eyes and have a thought or
But
do anything.
not the fullness of, though. Yeah, which is, I would say they talk about, and I think that's when they as they describe like what God is or who God is. I think we get these little snippets of it, but the totality of God or anything greater than the bits of involvement, I think they remove themselves from pretty heavily. But they definitely had a very, very, very different view of God. And remembering too, for I guess everybody else, like Yahweh was not their God, and Jesus was not the same either. So we're definitely talking about a very different thing to begin with.
True.
But just the concept, they believe God was so great, it's almost not worth time trying to figure out. They were much more focused on the knowledge and understanding because they believed they had to escape. That this was hell, in a sense. This was hell. This world was created by something evil, and they had to escape it. And so the escape was through means of knowledge and understanding. And Jesus was one of the people, the primary person that brought that to them. But the idea of like a deity, the great deity, the monad, that was uncomprehendable to them.
Sure. Yeah. Man, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
I'm kind of hungry though, so I'm gonna probably head out and eat a late dinner.
Oh, I'm about to bail anyways.
I could probably talk about this for another couple hours, but like I just have so much I don't want to open any more doors.
That's good. I'll do a poll and we'll do something similar soon. Or maybe we'll do hell next. Didn't we say we'd do hell next?
Yeah, and that would be good, you know. We can kind of pick up where we left off.
Yeah, and you got a lot on that. Okay, we'll do that. We'll do hell next week. Yeah, go eat, dude. I'm gonna read the comments, and then I'm gonna get out of here because I need to go to bed.
Take it easy, Pat. Love you. Bye, Joe.
Later, Ghost. J.H. Phillips just got here. Did you do that write up? Yes. We do if you're still here, J.H. Phillips. We do a Tuesday live stream every week on this YouTube channel. It's every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time. 7 p.m. Central Time. And the topic is voted upon in Discord. So if you haven't joined Discord, join Discord. It's free. It'll always be free. In the announcement section, I run a poll every week. So when we get off tonight, I'll probably do it tomorrow if I'm being honest. But I'll post a handful of topics. Everybody votes on a topic. Next week, we are going to do hell. But most weeks, I'll post a poll. Everybody votes. Whatever wins the vote is what we do. That's every Tuesday. And yeah, I've been making like slideshows recently. If not slideshows, you'll see a very messy Evernote write up. But either way, I tried to make it look prettier this week, y'all. I put some pictures in there. I'm figuring it out, you know. I'm giving a little bit more effort because I've had a little bit more time. But that's every Tuesday. Every Thursday, we're reading the Book of Giants. So that's next. If you go to Discord and you look at the events page, that's on a different YouTube channel. It's at Live Bible Study. Every Thursday is the Apocrypha. Every Saturday is something non-canonical. Right now, we're reading the Gospel of Thomas. Then we're going to read the Gospel of Judas. And then Sunday is something canonical. And we're reading the Book of Job right now. But join Discord. Use the events page to know where we're at. Tuesday topic discussions are here on this one. We've covered a lot of really interesting stuff recently. So if you're into this kind of thing, I'd recommend watching that. And then go subscribe to At Live Bible Study. It's a newer channel, but we're doing those 3 live streams every week there, reading all kinds of stuff in or out of the Bible. Trying to see, I don't want to brush over something important. Layman said, yes, you need both a rooster and a hen to get an egg that will hatch either a hen or rooster. But then you need 2 eggs that give you a rooster and a hen. From each, it's both. That was well done. Well done. And I think true, right? Like accurate. Layman also said there could be a really tight logical part to plasma. Oh, God. Like it could be a metaphysical necessity. There's a weird connection between logical and metaphysical possibilities that I struggle to parse. Yeah, I have no idea. That sounds interesting. I don't know anything about that though. That is smart people stuff, which I am not. Gordon said, where God has apathy for you, but Christ desires you. You think God has apathy for you? That's interesting. I don't normally hear that. Yeshua, heaven and hell as final destinations. Luke 16:22-23. Also said, I believe when a person dies, their soul goes to heaven if they are saved. Ephesians 2:8-9. Yeah, in a general sense, right? I think this conversation is more of like the depth beyond that. You know, what about the in-between? Is kind of what this one was about. I'm sorry, I'm going back in time. So if I read a comment from a long time ago, I apologize. I just don't want to ignore anything that was good. And if you did something good and I missed it, I'm genuinely sorry. But the speed was way too much tonight. Layman said, so we can stray from the route that's been predestined, but we can't change the route in a self-driving car that has a GPS with no steering wheel. I don't know. So I've always described this like a 5-year-old, and it's the choose your own adventure type thing. And I think Kat and I were talking about this a few weeks ago, is free will can exist even if God knows what's going on. Like if God knows all possible outcomes, but doesn't force you into taking one of those possible outcomes, you have free will. No, it's not total free will, but even then I would kind of argue it is. But if there were 10 paths of possibilities for every human to take, and nobody pushed or forced you into any of them, just because God knows all 10 possibilities, and even if God knows which one you're going to pick, it doesn't necessarily mean he forced your hand. Necessarily. You still have free will. You could just kind of argue that it's not absolute free will if he knew which route you would take. Did he predestine that though, or does he just know what you're going to do far before you'd ever do it? But the choose your own adventure has always been my favorite way to look at it, and my favorite way to get people to understand the concept of free will or open theism, things like that. I assume that's what you were getting at. If it wasn't, then I'm sorry for the rant. Layman also said, I think predestination is like setting a GPS to a destination and the route is all mapped out, but predetermination is like setting a GPS in a self-driving car without steering. Yeah. In a sense, I think some Calvinists would disagree with the predestination description, but it certainly depends on the Calvinist that you're talking to. I am in deep talks with Calvinists on the regular on Twitter, and oftentimes it is about predestination. So I'm up to speed on what they are thinking. Layman also said, Sheol is non-experiential and pointless. It's just sleep. Purgatory is experiential and driven towards purifying persons. That's a good way to describe that, yeah. At least the biblical description of Sheol is like an emptiness, a darkness, a smoke. And the not biblical, but the traditional description of purgatory is more experiential, yeah. Like you're moving towards something, you're seemingly actively doing things. Others back on earth are actively doing things. Yeah, that's a good way to snapshot that. I like that. That's well said. Let's see. The Catholic faith, Gordon said, was for the whole world and had to address salvation in a more general context and developed a theology. The Catholic faith was, so in a literal sense, yes. Like Catholic just means universal. So the Catholic Church in the first couple centuries was not the Roman Catholic Church. The Catholic Church started as quite literally the universal church of Christianity. However, even then it was not universal. Like there were other sects of Christianity already. And that first iteration of Catholicism was already demonizing those other versions of Christianity. And then they evolved around, I believe, the 9th century into something official of the Roman Catholic Church, which became an entirely different animal. David says, some of my beliefs come from eating the meat and throwing away the bones of a false or heretical belief. Amen. I'm sure you do that a lot with me, good sir. I'm sure you do that a lot with me. Layman said, I wonder if that leads to a sense of pointlessness or nihilism if our existence isn't about improvement. I think it certainly can, yeah. I mean, I've had that debate with atheists and agnostics before. I think it can. I don't think it necessarily has to, though. Like an atheist can certainly decide that his life has meaning while here. There's no inherent reason that anything has to be beyond this life. Like that's not a prerequisite to this reality. It's something some people choose to believe, or it's sometimes something people feel forced to believe. I don't feel like I chose that. I feel like I was forced into believing that because so many things stacked up. But I lived as an atheist for a long time as well. And I still saw meaning in life. Like the meaning then is just finite. Whereas like there's a lot of meaning from now until my time on this earth is done. It's just, when you have the perspective of beyond this reality, it makes this seem, I think I am more nihilistic as a Christian than I was as an atheist. Personally, I see this world as irrelevant. I see this reality, this life, as almost entirely irrelevant. And like, I just need to get through it for the next thing. I think there's specific things I'm supposed to do here, and I feel that I understand those for the most part. And so outside of those, I see most of this as just noise to go to the next thing. Whereas an atheist who believes they're going to die and then that's it, they would probably, some of them would be the opposite of nihilistic about this finite time. Esmail said, fundamentalists and evangelicals and probably Catholics, etc., are known for special pleading when it comes to using exegesis they don't allow for other groups. That is so true, my friend. So true. Wait, what? Mikkel said, don't know about you guys, but Purgatory feels so so comfy, right? Purgatory sounds terrible. To me, it sounds terrible. It's weird that they still perceive things in a single direction, like their disembodied eyes are still on the front of their disembodied heads on top of their non-bodies. What? I definitely missed something. I'm going to skip that. I very obviously missed something. Mikkel said, Geoffrey. But what about Satan paying a visit to God in the book of Job? Satan is an unclean spirit, isn't it? Great point. Great point. Wonderful point. Gordon said Satan is not a person, nor character, nor being. Satan is Peter. Satan is diction for a evil thought procedure you personally are responsible for undertaking. So how do you make sense of the Job story then? Because that's just one example. There are many more. How would you make sense of what Mikkel was pointing out there? I don't necessarily disagree with you, though, to be clear. Espel said, where the worm never dies and the fire is not quenched. It started out in one of the earliest creeds as the Catholic and Orthodox Church, but describing the early church, so-called. You know, we're talking about Catholic, or did I miss something else there too? Nothing, Geoffrey said, unclean can enter the kingdom of God, and God has definitely made his purifying fires available to his children. What was that in reference to? All right, guys, I am going to go to sleep. Because I'm not sure if I'm just missing things now, or if I am just brain blasted and shut off for the night. So, anybody who's not in the Discord, there's a link pinned to the top of the live chat. There's a link in the description of the video. Anybody who already is, bail, because you've heard this 1,000 times. We do all these live streams throughout the week, 4 to be exact, 2 different YouTube channels. The easiest way to keep track of it is through Discord. Join Discord, and then there's an events page. The events page has a link to the proper YouTube channel. It has the time in your time zone. I feel like that's all you need. We do 3 Bible studies a week. One of them is canon, one is non-canonical, and one is apocryphal, specifically. And then one is a topic discussion, and that is what you're watching right now. Come to Discord. That's all I got, because my brain is completely shut off. It is so past my bedtime. I love y'all, and I'll see you Thursday for the Book of Giants, which has been blasty blast. Okay, one more comment. Dude, the Christian nihilism thing, I think there are a lot of things that mean nothing in an ultimate sense, but that's why the focus on sanctification here makes the most sense. It's the only thing. I agree, I just don't think it's sanctification. I don't think that's the purpose. I think in a sense it is. But I think we're literally training spiritually for something. I think the soul is evolving for something that happens after this. And I think sanctification is just a minor part of that process. But I'm going to bed, and I'm not reading anymore because I will just keep doing this. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you all. I'm going to bed. I love you. Good night.